Hey guys, since I started the channel with a couple videos talking about SNES games, I wanted to make a video just to let you know my top 5 favorite Super Nintendo games. I don't consider these to be the absolute best on the console, but they are the 5 games that I like more than the rest. Here we go. The arcade was home to some of the best multiplayer games ever made. And while I loved the Simpsons arcade game, my favorite was always Turtles in Time. Turtles in Time was ported to the SNES in 1992, and luckily everything that made the arcade game great was carried over into the port. The visuals, which represented the cartoon well, and the upbeat, catchy music are all present in the Super Nintendo version. The turtles have different attack animations and the sprites are great. Turtles in Time just feels really good to play. I'll never get tired of throwing foot soldiers at the screen. If you haven't played it before, I suggest grabbing some pizza and bringing along a buddy because it's one of the best beat 'em up games on the console. After Mega Man 5 was released in December of 1992, Capcom decided it wanted to bring the Blue Bomber to the 16-bit era. The design team working on Mega Man X wanted to differentiate this new game from the series by introducing new characters and gameplay mechanics. Mega Man X was the first game in the series to give players the ability to dash and wall climb. These new mechanics allowed for more diverse level design and gameplay. At its core, it's still the same satisfying gameplay though. Choose a level, kill the bad robots, take their power, and repeat. The action is fast-paced and the levels are different and challenging enough to be enjoyable. The music in the game is great too, literally every track is great. I think my favorite is the music for the Storm Eagle stage. Mega Man X is a great action platformer, and although many prefer the sequel, Mega Man X2, the original Mega Man X is my favorite. Given the success of the first 2 games in the Zelda series, bringing the Hero of Time to the Super Nintendo was a no-brainer, and in April of 1992, A Link to the Past was released in the United States. A Link to the Past returned to a top-down perspective similar to the original Legend of Zelda instead of the side-scrolling gameplay from Zelda 2. Pulling mechanics and concepts from the first 2 games, A Link to the Past also added several new features, such as the ability for Link to move diagonally, sprint, and do a spinning sword attack. These changes made controlling Link feel more fluid and enjoyable. The visuals in A Link to the Past are great, and I really love the clean sprites and all the vibrant colors on the overworld. Speaking of the overworld, it's huge for its time with many secrets for the players to discover. The sound design in A Link to the Past is also great. Whether it's the music or just the sound of Link's sword slashing through the air, it all fits together well. A Link to the Past is just a classic Zelda game and one of the very best games on the Super Nintendo. Although it's actually the 6th game in the Final Fantasy series, it was renamed to Final Fantasy III for the Western audience to maintain naming continuity. Final Fantasy III has the traditional JRPG gameplay from the earlier entries in the series, but it's been further refined. The biggest addition to the formula is the Esper system. In Final Fantasy III, you can equip an Esper to a character, which not only allows that character to summon the Esper, but it also gives them access to additional magic. You can definitely see how this system inspired the Materia system that would follow in Final Fantasy VII. The cast of Final Fantasy III is also very strong. Terra is one of my favorite female characters in any media, and Interceptor is such a cool dog. The soundtrack of Final Fantasy III is of course one of the very best in the series. The extensive use of leitmotif is one of the defining points of the audio tracks. Each major character has their own theme, and it all ties together beautifully in the end theme, which combines them all into one composition lasting over 21 minutes. Dancing Mad is one of my favorite pieces of video game music. Final Fantasy III is a truly epic game in scope. To quote the Wikipedia article, the drama includes and extends past depicting a rebellion against an evil military dictatorship, pursuit of a magical arms race, use of chemical weapons in warfare, depiction of violent, apocalyptic confrontations with divinities, several personal redemption arcs, teenage pregnancy, and the continuous renewal of hope and life itself. I don't really have much else to add to that. Final Fantasy III is one of the greatest games of all time. Number 1, you saw this coming a mile away, Chrono Trigger. Released in 1995, Chrono Trigger was the brainchild of Hironobu Sakaguchi, the producer and creator of the Final Fantasy series, Yuji Ori, writer, game designer, and creator of the Dragon Quest series, and Akira Toriyama, character designer of Dragon Quest and creator of the Dragon Ball manga. Dubbed the Dream Team, these three set out to create something that no one had done before. Chrono Trigger's story revolves around traveling to various points in time to prevent a global catastrophe. It's easy for narratives that involve time travel to become muddled. The more paradoxes and loops you incorporate, the harder it becomes to follow. An example of this is Xenogears. I think that the story in Xenogears is excellent, but it has a lot of themes and a lot of different things going on, and the casual player probably has no clue what in the hell is going on. Chrono Trigger has some great side quests that flesh out the characters and build upon the time travel aspect without overcomplicating it. Combat in Chrono Trigger is simple on the surface. Each character can attack with his or her weapon, use a technique, or use an item. Each character has 8 techniques that they can learn to use in battle. Certain characters can combine their techniques to perform a double or even triple attack to great effect. The game has over 100 techniques, so you will definitely be mixing and matching characters to see all the cool combinations you can pull off. There are little touches that add nuance to the combat in Chrono Trigger as well. For example, enemies move around while you are waiting for your characters to be able to select a command. Depending on how close the enemies are together and what skill you select, you can hit multiple enemies at once. The cast of characters in Chrono Trigger is very well rounded. Each character feels important, and by the end of the game, you'll care for every single one of them. It's kind of rare, in my opinion, to actually like every single character in the game. Usually you'll like most of the characters, but not every single one of them. Chrono Trigger, however, none go to waste. The soundtrack for Chrono Trigger is another one of the Super Nintendo's very best. Again, the soundtrack uses leitmotifs of the Chrono Trigger main theme to create a sense of consistency throughout the whole soundtrack, and it really makes each track feel like pieces of the same puzzle. I'm personally a big fan of the track Wind Scene. The last thing I want to touch on in Chrono Trigger before this video goes on too long is the ending. The game has 13 different endings that you can see depending on certain criteria that you meet. The game also introduced an innovative New Game Plus feature which allows you to start the game over, keeping your character levels, techniques, and equipment. The game's multiple endings paired with the New Game Plus feature really give Chrono Trigger a lot of replayability. And that's pretty much it. Chrono Trigger is one of the very best RPGs ever made. I consider it a perfect JRPG, and it's easily my favorite Super Nintendo game. So that was my top 5 Super Nintendo games. There's so many great games on the console though, I can make a top 50 video if I wanted to. But what I really want is for you all to let me know what your top 5 favorite Super Nintendo games are. I'd love to read your lists in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. And I made a Twitter account. I'm going to link it in the description. It's pretty brand new, so there's not much on there, but I'm going to start using it more. Also, one last thing, I want to let you guys know I am working on another video, and it's for a different console this time, and I think you guys are going to like it a lot. I'll see you again soon.